morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who joins us from around the world. We're so glad you're here. This is Andrew and Renee. Welcome to the Stack series. Today we are exploring seasonal synergy, biophilic design, and the hidden rhythms of human biology.
We really are, and we've got a massive stack of sources to get through today.
Yeah, a really fascinating mix of material. We're looking at chronobiology research straight from the NIH, some incredibly dense architectural metasyntheses on biophilic design.
Indigenous wellness frameworks, too.
Right, exactly. Along with psychological studies on what they're calling Homo temporis, so seasonal humans, and some really cutting-edge nutritional science.
The mission for our exploration today is simple, but, it's profound. We want to figure out how you can biologically and environmentally resync yourself with the natural world.
Because right now, we are so out of sync.
We are. The reason this matters to you, the listener, is that modern humans are currently suffering from something the researchers call the Great Disconnect.
The great disconnect.
Yeah. If you look at human history, our current indoor, brightly lit, always-on lifestyle it's an absolute anomaly.
It totally is.
Think about your average day. You wake up in a temperature-controlled box. You stare at a glowing rectangular screen.
You commute in a metal box.
Right, and then you sit under artificial fluorescent panels all day long. We're just bathed in these brightly lit artificial environments, tethered to a culture that demands this 24/7 output.
But our biology hasn't updated to match that.
Exactly. Our biology hasn't changed at all. We are still fundamentally wired for the natural rhythms of the Earth.
So there's this profound mismatch.
A huge mismatch between the environments we've built and the biological hardware we actually inhabit. And this mismatch is pulling us out of balance in ways that are deeply unhealthy for us and the planet. So today is all about understanding that disconnect and exploring how we actually resync ourselves.
Okay, let's unpack this. We really need to start with this foundational idea of Homo temporis, seasonal humans.
It's a great concept.
It really is. I think, we all love to view ourselves as these highly evolved, detached beings. Like we've supposedly conquered nature.
Right. We have climate-controlled homes.
We have grocery stores stocked with every fruit imaginable in the dead of winter.
Yeah.
We don't really feel like we belong to the ecosystem anymore. But looking through these sources, it's clear that beneath the surface, we are inherently seasonal creatures.
We absolutely are.
We're biologically designed to respond to the changing of the seasons, just like the trees shedding their leaves or the animals outside our windows. Yet we completely ignore it.
Well, we don't just ignore it. Modern culture actively forces us into a rigid year-round productivity model.
Yeah.
This really started with the Industrial Revolution. Before that, human labor was largely agricultural. It was deeply tied to the sun and the seasons. You worked incredibly hard during the harvest, and you rested more during the winter.
But now the expectation is the exact same output in January as in July.
Exactly. The same mood, the same energy levels. And the evidence clearly shows that isolating ourselves indoors and pretending the seasons don't exist, it harms our mental and physical health.
I can definitely relate to that. Every winter, I hit this wall. I get that midwinter slump. The days get short, it's cold, and I just feel this deep fatigue.
And society makes you feel guilty for it.
Totally. You start thinking, I just need more willpower, I need to drink more coffee, and just push through.
But that guilt is entirely misplaced. The research frames that midwinter slump not as a failure of willpower, but as your body's natural call for hibernation self-care.
Hibernation self-care, I love that term.
It's a vital biological adaptation.
Yeah.
When the days shorten, your hormonal profile literally shifts.
Yeah.
Your body is practically screaming at you to slow down and conserve energy.
But playing devil's advocate here, my boss isn't going to care that I'm a seasonal creature when my quarterly report is due, right?
Right, and that is the fundamental friction the researchers highlight. You can't just tell your boss you're hibernating until March. But the science suggests we can adopt micro-practices of seasonal living. It's about shifting your expectations of yourself. Maybe in the winter, you prioritize sleep over that extra hour of late-night work.
Or changing your exercise routine.
Exactly. Shift from high-intensity indoor cardio to something more restorative. Make a point to get natural daylight on your face at noon. Honor the biological need for rest within the constraints we have.
Give yourself some grace when the biology demands it. And this seasonality isn't just about our energy levels. It fundamentally affects our physical fuel. When we talk about eating with the seasons, it's easy to dismiss that as just a cute trend for upscale farmers market.
Oh, it's far more than a trend. The nutritional science here is intense.
The sources from the UNC Nutrition Research Institute show that our food is essentially losing nutrients the second it's harvested.
Rapidly losing nutrients.
Mm.
When you buy a tomato or a leafy green that was picked prematurely so it could survive a 3,000-mile journey,
Stored in a refrigerated warehouse.
right, and artificially ripened, you're missing out on an enormous percentage of its optimal vitamins. The UNC findings specifically looked at fresh, locally grown leafy greens versus shipped greens.
And the local ones retain significantly more folate, right, which is absolutely vital for metabolism.
Yes, folate is crucial for DNA synthesis and repair.
Mm.
The broader takeaway is that different seasons naturally provide the exact sets of nutrients our bodies require at that specific time of year.
Like summer berries.
Exactly. Summer berries are packed with anthocyanins, the pigments that give them their deep colors. Those are incredible for supporting brain health and reducing oxidative stress during the long, highly active days of summer.
And then the menu naturally flips in the fall. Nature stops giving us berries and starts giving us root vegetables.
Squashes, sweet potatoes, turnips.
Right, and those provide slow-digesting carbohydrates and heavy fiber that keep us full, generate internal heat, and provide sustained energy during the darker months. Even the animals we rely on for food change with the seasons.
Yes, the farm-fresh egg data is fascinating.
Right, the nutritional profile of an egg fluctuates depending on what the pasture-raised hens are foraging. In the spring, when they are eating young grasses and bugs, the eggs are a massive source of high-quality choline.
Which is essential for brain development and liver function.
The quality of the nutrient is inextricably linked to the seasonal environment. We can't separate the food from the ecosystem it was grown in. That actually reminds me of the wild yaks.
Oh, the Qinghai-Shizang Plateau study.
Yes, that study blew my mind. What is happening with these yaks?
It's a remarkable study on metabolic adaptation. That plateau is one of the most extreme environments on Earth. It has very short, lush summers with abundant green grass, followed by incredibly long, brutal winters, where the yaks have to survive on basically dead, frozen vegetation.
So how do they not starve to death when their food turns to dried twigs for 8 months?
The researchers discovered that their gut microbiomes exhibit massive plasticity. Their internal microbial communities physically morph. Yes. In the summer, their gut bacteria are optimized to rapidly process lush greens and store fat.
Right.
But as winter approaches and the diet shifts to highly fibrous, dead vegetation, entirely different strains of bacteria proliferate in their gut.
Just naturally.
Naturally. These winter-specific microbes are hyper-efficient at breaking down tough cellulose and extracting every last possible calorie from the dry forage. The yak's digestive engine completely rebuilds itself twice a year to align with the seasonal diet.
That is unbelievable. Their stomach bacteria just tags out and a whole new crew comes in for the winter shift.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about our own gut microbiome. You can think of the human gut like a seasonal garden. You wouldn't go out in your backyard in the freezing snow and try to plant summer
The
tomatoes.
soil is wrong, the temperature is wrong.
It would be a disaster. So why do we insist on feeding our internal garden the exact same imported non-seasonal foods 365 days a year?
We're forcing our gut flora to grow out of season. And the consequence is dysbiosis, an imbalance in the gut which is linked to systemic inflammation. We are feeding summer foods to a winter gut.
And if we zoom out to the macro level, the infrastructure required to support this illusion of a seasonless diet is staggering. Eating seasonally requires very simple local infrastructure: a farm, a market, a short drive.
But to eat a fresh strawberry in December in New York,
Right. What does that actually take?
it requires a vastly complex, globalized, incredibly energy-intensive cold chain infrastructure. We harvest that strawberry in another hemisphere, immediately cool it, load it onto refrigerated trucks, fly it on refrigerated cargo planes,
Store it in refrigerated distribution centers.
and display it in refrigerated grocery aisles, all to artificially transport a less nutritious piece of fruit halfway across the world.
It's ecologically destructive and biologically inefficient. But we don't just do this with our food, we do it with our buildings, which brings us to biophilia and our physical environment. For anyone who isn't familiar, what exactly is basic biophilia?
Biophilia is a concept popularized by the biologist E.O. Wilson. It's our innate, hardwired biological connection to nature. Because humans evolved in the natural world, We have a deep physiological need to affiliate with other forms of life.
And because of that great disconnect trapping us indoors, we're starving for it.
We really are. And when we don't get it, our mental health tanks. Lack of contact with nature directly correlates with increased anxiety and slower cognitive function.
But we can't all just quit our jobs and live in the woods.
No.
So designers are stepping in with practical applications. I was captivated by the dental clinic example using that product called Lumlix.
Yes, Lumlix is a brilliant integration of biophilic design in a stressful, windowless environment. Imagine you're in a dental chair. You're anxious, staring at a blank ceiling with a harsh glare in your
That
face.
sounds awful.
It is. What designers have done is create artificial skylights. But it's not just a regular light bulb. They integrate lighting calibrated exactly to 6,500 Kelvin.
For those of us who aren't lighting engineers, what does 6,500 Kelvin feel like?
It's a very crisp, cool, blue-white light. It is essentially the exact color temperature of a bright, clear midday sky. This specific temperature is optimal for human concentration and suppressing melatonin.
So they take this highly calibrated light and combine it with realistic nature images.
Exactly. High-resolution images of a vibrant blue sky with moving clouds or a lush forest canopy.
And it actually works. It's not just an aesthetic trick. The studies show that in these clinics, simply giving patients visual exposure to these simulated nature images significantly reduces their anxiety.
Their heart rates drop. It even lowers their perception of pain.
And in hospital beds, it speeds up physical recovery times.
Our nervous systems are just deeply responsive to our visual environment. Looking at a simulated blue sky triggers an involuntary biological healing response.
It tricks the nervous system out of fight or flight and into rest and digest.
Absolutely.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because this brings us to a much more complex element of our visual environment, one that is currently sparking massive arguments in the medical field. Let's move into our active debate section, the blue light paradox.
This is perhaps one of the most misunderstood topics in modern health.
Totally. We hear constantly that blue light is the ultimate villain. It ruins your sleep, causes eye strain, it's destroying your retinas. We're sold blue light blocking glasses everywhere. But the sources show the science is heavily divided, because blue light is actually absolutely essential.
It is.
Let's start with the good. Why do we need it?
To understand the good, we look at the anatomy of the human eye. Scientists used to believe the eye only had two types of photoreceptors, rods and cones. Rods help us see in the dark. Cones give us color vision and detail.
The image-forming receptor.
Right. But relatively recently, a massive discovery was made. We found a third receptor in the retina.
A third receptor. How did we miss that?
Because they don't form images. These cells are called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, iPRGCs for short. They only make up about 1% to 2% of the cells in the retina.
Okay.
And they contain a specific photopigment called melanopsin. What's fascinating is that melanopsin has a peak light absorption right in the blue light spectrum, specifically around 470 to 480 nanometers.
So if rods and cones are like the camera lens taking the picture so I can read a book, these iPRGCs are like the body's internal light meter.
That is the perfect analogy.
They aren't helping me see. They're just measuring the ambient light in the room to tell my brain what time of day it is.
Precisely. These iPRGCs project their signals directly to a tiny region deep in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. The SCN is our master circadian clock.
It orchestrates everything.
Everything. When that specific 480 nanometer blue light hits your iPRGCs, it sends an instantaneous signal to the SCN saying, the sun is up, it is morning.
So the SCN immediately suppresses melatonin.
Yes, the sleep hormone. And it triggers a spike in cortisol to increase alertness.
This is why everyone says getting bright sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning is so important. You're setting the timer on your biological clock, so you will fall asleep 16 hours later.
Without that daily anchor of blue wavelength light, our circadian rhythms would drift completely out of sync. So in that specific band, 480 nanometers blue light is our essential biological alarm clock.
Okay, that's the good. We need it to function. But the sources don't shy away from the bad. The dark side of blue light exposure, especially from artificial screens at the wrong time or wrong wavelengths. The research details light-induced retinal damage.
Photomechanical, photothermal, and photochemical.
Let's focus on photochemical damage, because that's the one associated with our laptops and LED lights, right?
Yes. Photochemical damage occurs from longer, less intense exposures to light in the visible range. We aren't talking about staring at the sun, that's photothermal damage. We are talking about chronic, daily exposure to short wavelength blue light.
dropping down into the 400 to 450 nanometer range.
Exactly. The harsher, more energetic end of the blue spectrum.
What exactly is happening in the eye when we stare at that 400 to 450 nanometer light for 10 hours a day?
Chronic exposure to this specific band causes the substance called lipofuscin to accumulate in a layer of the eye called the retinal pigment epithelium, the RPE.
And the RPE sits right behind the photoreceptors to nourish them.
Yes.
I found the best way to understand lipofuscin is to think of it as cellular trash. It's a natural byproduct of your eye processing light. But here is the terrifying part. When this cellular trash absorbs that specific short wavelength blue light, it becomes highly reactive.
It generates reactive oxygen species, or ROS. Essentially, the blue light strikes the lipofuscin, and the cellular trash catches fire.
Wow.
It creates intense oxidative stress within the microenvironment of the eye. This damages the cells of the RPE, and when the RPE dies, it can no longer support the photoreceptors. The photoreceptors starve and die.
Irreversible cell death. And this is heavily implicated in age-related macular degeneration, right? AMD.
Yes, which is a leading cause of severe permanent vision loss in older adults. You lose the center of your vision.
And the research details something called the photoreversal of bleaching in a study by Grimm and colleagues. Walk me through this. What is bleaching in the eye?
Under normal circumstances, when light hits a pigment in your eye called rhodopsin to create an image, that molecule gets bleached. It changes shape, does its job, and then it is exhausted.
It has to recharge.
Right. It goes through a slow metabolic cycle to regenerate. This slow cycle acts as a natural speed limit for how much light your cells can process.
So the cell takes a picture, gets tired, needs a minute. What happens when you blast it with high-intensity blue light?
Grimm demonstrated that intense blue light can cause this bleached rhodopsin to regenerate photochemically, almost instantly. It forces the molecule to snap back into its ready state, bypassing the slow pathway.
That sounds like fast charging your phone. Why is that bad?
Because biologically, by removing that speed limit, you vastly augment the capacity of the molecules to absorb photons. They're absorbing light, snapping back, and absorbing more at a hyperaccelerated rate.
Massively increasing the photon load.
Which accelerates the production of those reactive oxygen species. You're overloading the circuit.
It's like pouring gasoline on that cellular trash fire. The cells just burn out. So we have this intense paradox. 470 to 480 nanometers is absolutely essential for our master clock. But 400 to 450 nanometers is highly phototoxic and destroys our vision.
It is a profound biological tension.
And this paradox is sparking a massive debate right now regarding how we treat the aging eye, specifically with cataract surgery.
This is one of the most fascinating intersections of biology and medicine. As humans age, the natural lens of our eye begins to yellow. For a long time, we viewed this just as degradation.
But this yellowing actually acts as a powerful natural filter. It physically blocks out a significant amount of the short wavelength blue light.
Precisely. It's an evolutionary shield protecting an older, more vulnerable retina from that toxic 400 to 450 nanometer range.
It's like built-in blue light blocking glasses.
Exactly. But as people age, these lenses often become so cloudy they develop into cataract, severely impairing vision. During surgery, the cloudy natural lens is removed and replaced with an artificial intraocular lens, an IOL.
And the debate is, should surgeons implant a clear, transparent lens or a yellow-tinted lens that mimics the old one?
That is the exact debate. Because if you put in a clear lens, you let a massive flood of blue light back into the eye.
Which can be amazing for an elderly person's sleep. We know older adults suffer from terrible insomnia and circadian disruption, largely because their cloudy lens has been starving their iPRGCs of the blue light they need to set their clock.
Yes, studies show clear lenses dramatically improve sleep quality, daytime alertness, and cognitive function in the elderly. The brain finally knows what time it is.
But you just stripped away their natural armor.
And that is the competing perspective. Those advocating for yellow-tinted lenses argue the aging retina is highly vulnerable. By blocking that toxic blue light, the yellow lens protects the older eye from severe photochemical damage.
To illustrate how vulnerable the aging eye is, the sources reference studies using SOD1 knockout mice. Let's break that down. What is an SOD1 knockout mouse?
SOD1 is a vital antioxidant enzyme. It's part of the body's natural defense against oxidative stress. It puts out those cellular trash fires. Scientists genetically engineered mice to lack this enzyme. They knocked it out.
So these mice mimic the oxidative stress and weakened defenses of human aging.
Especially when combined with a dietary zinc deficiency, which is common in older adults. And when researchers exposed these aging knockout mice to standard commercial fluorescent light,
The kind in any office building.
right, it absolutely devastated their retinas. The photochemical damage was severe and rapid.
But the kicker is the control group. Normal, healthy young mice with intact antioxidant defenses were exposed to the exact same fluorescent light, and nothing happened. Their retinas were totally fine.
It proves definitively that as we age, our retina loses its ability to fight off oxidative stress. A light environment safe for a 20-year-old can be highly toxic to a 70-year-old.
Making the argument for the protective yellow lens seem incredibly important. You don't want to cure a cataract only to accelerate macular degeneration. Though the research did mention that supplementing with lutein, which deposits as a blue-blocking pigment in the macula, can alleviate some photo damage.
It's a perfect example of balancing two competing biological needs: circadian entrainment versus retinal protection.
And this tension between output and biology comes up again on a societal level. The literature discusses a debate between modern productivity demands and the realities of cyclical living. Now, we are strictly reporting the source framing here. We aren't taking any political stance.
Of course. The authors of these sociological texts point out that the modern economic model demands constant linear productivity.
It requires workers and markets to produce value at the exact same upward trajectory every single day. A company expects you to hit KPIs in November just as easily as in May.
But the authors contrast this linear demand with the biological reality of cyclical living. Human bodies operate on dynamic cycles. The sources highlight a growing movement toward reclaiming natural rhythms.
Like honoring the physiological shifts of the menstrual cycle in the workplace, recognizing female health as inherently cyclical.
Right. They argue that forcing a cyclical biology into a rigid, linear model causes physiological stress and psychological burnout.
The texts heavily advocate for embracing hibernation self-care during autumn and winter. By allowing ourselves to deliberately slow down and rest during darker seasons, we actually build long-term resilience.
Fighting this natural rhythm leads to the severe post-holiday lull in January. You push yourself through November and December, and your body forces a crash because it was denied its biological rest.
What's fascinating here is how these foundational biological truths are driving entirely new scientific and architectural frontiers. Let's move to part 3. Frontiers. What might change everything?
Let's look at the evolution of circadian lighting.
I feel like circadian lighting has been a marketing buzzword for years. You buy a bulb that looks a little yellow, and it claims to be circadian friendly. But looking at the academic sources, this has matured into a rigorous discipline.
It's evolved light years beyond a warm LED bulb. Academic circadian lighting design involves strategic manipulation of light across 3 dimensions: spectral, temporal, and spatial.
Break those down. What does that look like in a room?
Spectral refers to manipulating the exact nanometer wavelengths, balancing that 480 nanometer alertness trigger with the 450 nanometer phototoxicity risk.
Okay.
Temporal involves the precise timing and duration of light exposure throughout the 24-hour cycle. And spatial is perhaps the most interesting. It's about the angle at which the light hits your eye.
Right, because those IPRGC light meter cells are heavily concentrated in the lower half of your retina.
Evolutionarily, they are positioned to look up at the sky to measure the sun. So bright lights shining up at you from a desk don't trigger the circadian system as effectively as an overhead light designed to mimic the angle of the sun.
And the true frontier they're exploring now is personalized adaptive lighting. The researchers envision lighting systems integrated with wearable biological sensors on your wrist or ring.
Yes. The concept is that wearables would continuously measure your real-time circadian phase markers, body temperature, heart rate variability, and crucially, they'd estimate your DLMO.
Dim light melatonin onset.
Yes, the exact individualized moment your unique body naturally begins to produce melatonin.
Imagine a day in the life with this tech. You're at your office at 2 p.m., you hit an afternoon slump, your wearable detects your cortisol dropping, it talks to the building, and the lights above your desk automatically shift their spectral output to give you a specific 480 nanometer blue light boost to wake you up.
And then you go home, and based on your personal DLMO, your house perfectly dims and warms the lighting exactly 2 hours before your biological bedtime.
It's essentially turning architecture into personalized preventative medicine. Your environment dynamically responds to your real-time physiological needs.
And speaking of responsive architecture, the frontiers of biophilic design in extreme climates are truly mind-blowing. We reviewed a major MDPI metasynthesis looking at biophilic design in cold, Arctic, and subarctic climates.
This was fascinating because it breaks the standard biophilia rules. The researchers used NVivo14's software to code deductive and inductive themes to find patterns in how humans survive extreme cold. Because you can't tell someone living above the Arctic Circle to go for a nature walk in January.
It's negative 40 degrees and pitch black for months during the polar night.
You can't just put a potted fern in the corner and say your biophilia is cured.
Exactly. In these environments, biophilic design has to become hyper-functional and dynamic. The major innovation is what they call photobiological adaptive envelopes.
Sounds like sci-fi. What is a photobiological adaptive envelope?
It's a highly dynamic building facade. They aren't static walls. They are advanced mechanized systems of windows, louvers, and shading panels that physically adjust their configuration, color filtering properties, and reflectance continuously.
So the building physically moves and adapts.
Yes. During the extreme polar night, with zero natural sunlight, these adaptive envelopes manipulate internal artificial circadian lighting, while capturing and amplifying any tiny available external light, like moonlight reflecting off the snow.
Wow.
They aggressively regulate occupants' circadian rhythms to prevent severe depression and sleep disorders while managing the thermal comfort of the building.
It proves biophilia isn't just about looking at a leaf. It's dynamic, light-responsive architecture acting as a living surrogate for the missing natural environment.
It's a brilliant fusion of engineering and chronobiology.
So we have all this hyper-advanced tech on the horizon, wearables talking to smart bulbs, adaptive envelopes shifting in the snow. But how do we combine this advanced tech with ancient human wisdom? Our sources strongly emphasize that indigenous cultures have understood seasonal living and biophilic connection for millennia.
This is a critical discussion in the literature regarding the co-production of sustainability. Modern science is realizing health engineering must integrate indigenous knowledge, or IK. However, the sources warn against modern biases causing colonization in the co-producing process.
How do you colonize a sustainability process?
It happens when researchers approach indigenous communities and extract practical parts that fit neatly into Western tech-centric models, like a specific plant or farming technique, but completely discard the deeper spiritual, ethical, and cultural contexts.
They commodify the knowledge without respecting the worldview.
Exactly.
The sources detail specific frameworks to illustrate this holistic worldview, like the Kanakamali, the native Hawaiian values. Their approach to wellness isn't a medical checklist. It's a holistic progression. It begins with aloha, deep love, empathy, and compassion.
And through aloha, you work toward becoming pono. Pono means achieving a profound, righteous balance in your mind, physical body, and spirit.
This balance is guided by mana, the divine life force energy, and you maintain this state by graciously carrying your kuleana.
Kuleana translates to your birthright and your profound responsibility to your community and the earth itself. The texts also reference the Australian Aboriginal concept of Didiri,
which translates to an inner, deep listening and a quiet, still awareness, a practice of aligning your internal rhythms with the natural rhythms of the land. The contrast with modern Western wellness is jarring. Western wellness is almost entirely individualized.
It's about my wearable data, my sleep score, my longevity.
But indigenous health frameworks are fundamentally collective. They operate on the principle of connection as country.
Human health is inextricably linked to the health of the physical environment and the spiritual well-being of the entire community. The idea of an individual being perfectly healthy while the river is polluted is a biological and spiritual impossibility. You cannot be well if the land is sick.
That is such a profound shift in perspective, and it beautifully bridges us into the final section, implications. Ethics, economics, society. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what does all this mean for how we behave? The Homo temporis data has some wild sociological implications.
When researchers map physiological data against societal trends, the patterns are undeniable. Seasons alter human morality and behavior. There's a strong, measurable correlation between rising ambient heat in the summer and increased rates of violence and aggression.
Physical heat creates physiological stress that spills over into behavioral volatility. But even more subtly, our psychology shifts in the colder months. The researchers discuss disease avoidance strategies.
During colder seasons, when communicable illnesses are historically more prevalent, humans naturally exhibit higher disgust sensitivity. It's a subconscious evolutionary defense mechanism. Your brain makes you more easily grossed out to keep you away from pathogens.
Makes sense. Don't eat weird-smelling meat, stay away from sick people. But the crazy part is how this biological disgust sensitivity spills over into modern political behavior.
It really does.
The studies show that when disgust sensitivity is heightened, it actually lowers our generalized social trust. We become more wary of strangers and outgroups.
And the sources suggest these seasonal psychological fluctuations can influence mass behavior, like voting preferences.
Mhm.
A population with lowered social trust may be subtly pushed toward more socially conservative or isolationist policies.
It also alters financial decision-making mindsets. In the winter, humans naturally become more risk-averse and focused on resource conservation, which impacts economic markets and consumer spending. We are voting and spending based on our biology.
So if our psychology is deeply tied to the physical environment, how does our connection to nature impact our behavior toward the Earth? Do we treat the planet better if we feel connected to it?
The psychological research is unequivocal. There is a direct, measurable link between personal time spent in nature and a subsequent increase in pro-environmental attitudes and ecological stewardship.
People protect what they care about.
Exactly. If you never experience nature, you won't fight to save it. But there's a tangible biological benefit occurring simultaneously. I read about trees releasing oils, phytoncides. What is the mechanism there?
When you walk through a dense forest, the trees actively emit airborne organic compounds called phytoncides. They release these essential oils to protect themselves from insects and bacteria. But when humans breathe in these phytoncides, they act as a biological superpower for our immune system.
The studies show exposure to these forest environments significantly increases the count and activity level of our natural killer cells, or NK cells.
NK cells are our body's frontline defense against tumors and virus-infected cells.
So being in nature and breathing the air is literally boosting our immune system's ability to fight cancer while reducing stress hormones like cortisol.
The authors present this deep sensory grounding in nature as the antidote to modern digital materialism. The digital space is built on algorithms driving social comparison. That comparison drives a chronic sense of inadequacy, fueling impulsive, unsustainable consumerism to fill the void.
We buy things we don't need to impress people on screens, creating ecological anxiety.
But stepping away from the screen and engaging in pure sensory awareness in a natural environment, feeling the temperature drop, smelling the phytoncides, forcefully breaks that digital cycle. It restores intrinsic values and reduces the physiological stress that leads to impulsive consumption.
However, bringing all these biological interventions back indoors raises massive ethical questions. This raises an important question regarding those frontier technologies we discussed. The adaptive circadian lighting, the wearable sensors. What happens when our buildings start watching our biology that closely?
It raises an enormous ethical question regarding privacy. If your office building uses continuous occupancy sensing and physiological data to personalize your environment, who owns that data?
Right. Could your employer track your exact periods of cognitive focus and fatigue based on how the lights respond to your biological output? Could that data be used against you in performance reviews?
The ethical implications of continuous biometric surveillance in the built environment are profound and largely unregulated.
And beyond the privacy nightmare, you've discovered how absolutely vital biological nourishment is. Proper circadian light and biophilic design aren't just luxuries. They are fundamental requirements for metabolic health, sleep, and cognitive function.
But right now, these advanced, mathematically calibrated lighting systems and adaptive envelopes are incredibly expensive.
Will optimal biological environments simply become luxury items for the wealthy?
The sources warn of a bifurcated future. Higher socioeconomic populations will live and work in highly engineered, biologically optimized spaces that actively enhance their health.
While lower socioeconomic populations are relegated to poorly designed, windowless environments with cheap, flickering fluorescent lighting, environments that chronically disrupt circadian rhythms, trigger those cellular trash fires, and accelerate metabolic diseases. Access to healthy light and connection to natural rhythms could become a profound dividing line in public health.
It forces you to reconsider the spaces you spend your time in every day and what they are demanding of your biology.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the seasonal human and the midwinter slump. We explored how our gut microbiome should shift like the wild yaks, the massive paradox of blue light being both our master clock and a retinal hazard, the debate over cataract lenses, adaptive circadian architecture, and the profound wisdom of indigenous holistic health.
To summarize our journey, I think the major takeaway is that the Great Disconnect is a stark biological reality. We cannot pretend we are separate from nature without paying a heavy physical and psychological price. The goal is to intelligently and ethically integrate our evolutionary need for natural rhythms into the environments we design.
And that leads us to one final unscripted thought to ponder as you go about your day. What if the hyper advanced smart cities and AI driven biological environments we are furiously trying to invent for the future are ultimately just incredibly high tech, expensive attempts to recreate the ancient, seasonal, and indigenous ways of living we accidentally engineered out of our lives in the first place?
Before we wrap up, thank you to all our partners, sponsors, and scholars who made this podcast and the research possible. We're truly grateful for your support.
And to our listeners, thank you for being part of this journey with us. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe and support us in Patreon. And of course, you can write to us in comments if a specific topic needed to be covered, which help us all to grow. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and let the search for wisdom guide you forward. Have a great day.